The sun had just dipped below the rolling hills of the small prairie town, casting long shadows over the dusty streets and quiet farms. It was late evening, the kind where the only sounds were the distant chirping of crickets and the faint rustling of dry grass in the breeze. The old barn on the outskirts of town, a weathered structure that had stood for generations, loomed dark and silent against the amber sky. Inside, quiet memories of cattle and hay filled the air, but tonight, that silence was shattered. Suddenly, a sharp rap echoed through the stillness. It was uneven, urgent, almost desperate. Someone was pounding on the barn door with a force that made the wood tremble. The pounding came again, louder this time, followed by a trembling voice. A boy's voice, young, trembling, filled with fear, calling out, "They hurt my mama." The boy's words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The townsfolks, settling in for the night, froze in their tracks. Whispers began to ripple through the community. Who could it be? What had happened? But no one moved yet. That sound, that cry, was enough to send a shiver down even the hardest of hearts. In the shadows of his small home, Jack, the old cowboy, was sitting on his porch, whittling a piece of cedar. His weathered face was etched with lines of hard-won wisdom, eyes sharp and alert despite his age. He had seen trouble before, but something about that pounding at the barn stirred a deep unease within him. As he set his knife aside, he looked toward the distant barn, sensing that this was no ordinary night. Then came the knocking again, more frantic, more desperate, until the door finally began to creak open. Jack's thick frame rose slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel as he made his way toward the sound. His heart pounded with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Who could be out here at this hour? And what did that boy know that everyone needed to hear? As Jack reached the barn, he could hear the boy's voice trembling through the cracks in the wood. "They hurt my mama," he repeated, louder now, voice cracking with emotion. Without hesitation, Jack pushed the barn door open, revealing a small figure, dirty, trembling, eyes wide with terror. The boy looked up at him, clutching a worn-out cap in his tiny hands, voice barely above a whisper. "Please, you gotta help. They've hurt her bad." The old cowboy's face softened, but his eyes remained intense. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The quiet town's peaceful facade had just been shattered. The peaceful night had turned into a scene of chaos and urgency. Jack knew that this was a turning point, a moment that would forever change the story of their town. Word spread like wildfire. Folks gathered at the barn, whispering fears and speculations. Who had done this? Why? The boy's trembling voice and tear-streaked face were enough to ignite a storm of suspicion and anger. Some looked toward the horizon, imagining the worst. Others reached for their rifles, ready to face whatever danger lurked in the darkness. But Jack, standing amidst the crowd, knew that the real story was just beginning. There was a darkness in this town, a darkness that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. And tonight that darkness had come knocking, not just at the barn, but at the very heart of their lives. He looked down at the boy, who was now clutching his mother's hand, tears streaming down his face. Jack's voice broke the tense silence. "We're gonna find out what's happened, and we're gonna make sure it don't happen again, no matter what it takes." His words carried a weight of resolve, a promise to protect what was left of their peace. As the night deepened, everyone knew that nothing would be the same again. That knock on the barn door had opened a door to a mystery, one that would test the courage, the loyalty, and the very soul of their small town. And the old cowboy, with his steady gaze and unwavering heart, was about to lead them into a fight they couldn't ignore. Because in this town, when the innocent are hurt, the old stories of justice and honor are what keep everyone going. Tonight, the town's story had taken a dark turn, and no one would forget the night the boy knocked on that barn door and said, "They hurt my mama." In the quiet hush of that unforgettable night, as the boy's trembling voice echoed through the darkness. There was a truth deeper than fear or anger, something born from a bond that could never be broken. The old cowboy, Jack, had lost someone he loved long ago, a woman who had been the light of his life, his wife, and the mother of his children. She had been taken from him in a tragic accident, leaving behind a promise etched into his heart, a vow he made to himself and her that he would always protect what mattered most. That vow wasn't just words. It was a sacred oath woven into his very soul, guiding every step he took, every decision he made. That night, as the boy's words pierced the air, "They hurt my mama." Something inside Jack stirred with an unyielding fire. It wasn't just concern for the girl or the girl's mother. It was a deep, unbreakable connection rooted in the memories of his own loss. He remembered the tears he shed when he held his wife's hand in her final moments, the silent promise he made then, that he would spend his life guarding the innocent, fighting against the darkness that threatened to swallow them all. That vow had carried him through the years, shaping him into a man of honor, a protector of the weak, a keeper of justice. Now, standing at the barn, looking into the wide, terrified eyes of that boy, Jack saw a reflection of himself, fear, grief, and a desperate need for safety. He understood that this wasn't just about a mother's pain. It was about defending the very soul of their community, their families, and their future. The boy's words ignited a fierce resolve within him, a moral obligation that had nothing to do with law or tradition, but everything to do with love and memory. That love, the love he had for his wife, for his children, for every innocent soul in this town, was the fire that fueled his every action. He remembered the night he had promised her that he would always stand between darkness and light. That vow had been unspoken but unwavering. It was the reason he had fought battles, faced hardships, and carried scars, both seen and unseen. It was the reason he refused to back down now, even when the night seemed to swallow him whole. Because the pain of losing his wife had etched a sacred duty into his heart, to protect the vulnerable, to hold on to what was pure, and to ensure that no other mother or child would suffer at the hands of evil as she had. As Jack pushed open the barn door and saw the trembling boy clutching his mother's hand, that vow surged through him like a rallying cry. His eyes softened with compassion, but his voice was steady, unwavering. "I promised her," he whispered to himself as much as to the boy, "that I'd do everything I could to keep this town safe, that I'd stand for those who can't stand for themselves." His words carried the weight of a lifetime, an unbreakable promise forged in heartbreak but strengthened by hope. His reaction wasn't just shock or anger. It was a profound, moral conviction. This was his purpose, his calling born from love lost and a vow made in the depths of despair. That promise wasn't just about justice. It was about honoring her memory, preserving her legacy, and protecting the innocence she once cherished. It was a sacred duty that no darkness could nullify, no matter how fierce or cruel. In that moment, with the boy's tear-streaked face pressed into his rough hand, Jack understood what this night truly meant. It wasn't just about a single act of violence or cruelty. It was about the moral fabric of their community, woven with love, sacrifice, and unbreakable bonds. And he knew, beyond any doubt, that he would carry that vow forward, no matter what darkness lurked in the shadows. Because some promises, some bonds are too sacred to break. And in his heart, Jack carried the unshakable truth. As long as he drew breath, he would stand against the darkness, protect the innocent, and honor the memory of the woman he loved, who had once told him that love and justice were the greatest vows of all. The old cowboy's cabin sat isolated on the edge of the ridge, overlooking a vast, empty desert that stretched endlessly into the horizon. The sun had long since dipped below the jagged mountains, leaving behind a bruised sky painted in shades of purple and rust. Inside, the air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint creak of an old wooden chair and the whisper of a desert wind slipping through cracked window panes. Jack sat alone in the dim light, his weathered hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the dusty floor. The room was a reflection of his soul, scarred, silent, and haunted. On the wall behind him hung a faded photograph, edges curling and corners torn. It was a picture of a young woman, smiling softly, holding a boy in her arms. The boy's face flushed with innocence, and her eyes alive with love. That was his wife, gone now for many years. Her name was Marie, and her memory had become a ghost that lingered in every corner of this lonely house. Jack's gaze lingered on that picture, his jaw clenched, a weight pressing down on his chest. Guilt, loss, regret. They all clung to him like the dust in the air he couldn't shake. He reached out slowly, fingers trembling, and traced the outline of a small, faded metal pin to his shirt, a relic from a war long past. It was a symbol of the man he once was, someone who fought for honor, for duty. But now, all that remained was this hollow shell, haunted by memories of things lost and choices he wished he could undo. His eyes drifted to a battered leather-bound journal on the table, a collection of broken words, unspoken regrets, and unfulfilled promises. He opened it with cautious reverence, revealing pages filled with hurried notes, sketches, and dried ink stains, reminders of a life he had tried to forget but could never fully escape. In one corner of the room, an old, battered guitar leaned against the wall, its strings dusty and unused. Jack's fingers brushed over the worn wood, feeling the roughness of age and neglect. Music had once been his refuge, a way to drown out the pain. But now silence reigned. The silence screamed louder than any storm outside. His eyes flicked to a small pile of letters, yellowed, frayed at the edges. He had kept them all these years, careful not to forget. Letters from Marie, from his children, words of love, hope, and longing. He remembered her voice as he read those pages, soft and warm, echoing in his mind even now. But those words, once so full of life, now seemed distant, like echoes of a past that refused to fade. A single tear traced a line down his weathered cheek, catching the faint light. He wiped it away roughly, as if trying to erase the feeling. But he knew it was futile. The pain was part of him now, embedded in scars that ran beneath his skin, in the silent hollows of his heart. Every mark, every memory, was a testament to a life he had lost, a family torn apart by time and tragedy. The desert outside was silent and vast, mirroring his own emptiness. The land had seen him through the worst of his days, through loss, guilt, and remorse. Sometimes he wondered if the desert was forgiving, or if it simply swallowed everything whole, leaving no trace of the past. He often thought about Marie, the life they had planned, the dreams they had shared. Now, all that remained was this lonely house, a relic of a broken past. He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling the dry, dusty air. In that quiet moment, Jack felt the weight of his guilt. 1,000 unspoken apologies, 1,000 what-ifs echoing in his mind. He had promised himself he'd protect his family, that he'd never let anything hurt them. But he had failed. The scars he carried on his hands, on his soul, were proof of that failure. And yet, despite everything, he still carried a flicker of hope. Hope that, somehow, the memories of Marie, of his children, and of the life they once had, would give him the strength to face whatever darkness came next. Because some wounds run so deep that they become part of you, an unbreakable bond that no amount of time can undo. In this silent house, surrounded by relics of a broken past, Jack was alone with his ghosts. The desert outside stretched into infinity, an endless mirror of his own solitude. And within him, a quiet resolve was forming, a promise to carry their memory, to honor what was lost, and to find redemption in the faint hope that someday, somehow he might find peace. The night air hung heavy and thick, wrapped in a tense silence that seemed to pulse with the weight of unspoken fears. Word of the boy's plea had spread quickly through the town, but it was the old cowboy, Jack, who knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. If they were going to face what was coming, They needed strength, solid, unwavering human strength. And so, he reached out to his allies, those who had stood with him in battles past, each embodying a core value that would now be crucial in their fight for justice. First, he called upon Grayson, the old soldier who had seen the worst of war and come out with his soul scarred but unbroken. Grayson was a tall man, with a face carved by years of hardship and a gaze that could cut through steel. His loyalty was fierce, rooted in a lifetime of standing beside those he believed in. When Jack's voice crackled through the radio, Grayson answered without hesitation. "You can count on me, Jack. Loyalty's what keeps us human, and I won't let you down." His presence was a promise, a reminder that some bonds are forged in fire and hold steady through any storm. Next, Jack summoned Sarah, a former biker queen known for her courage. Her leather jacket, adorned with patches of honor and scars of battles fought on and off the road, reflected her fearless spirit. When she arrived, her eyes burned with determination. "You call on courage, you get me?" she said with a smirk, but her voice betrayed a deep resolve. "No matter what they've done, we stand tall. That's what courage is, facing the darkness head-on." Her fearless stance reminded everyone that sometimes bravery is simply refusing to back down when faced with injustice. Then, there was Marcus, a man whose redemption story was whispered across towns and highways. Once a thief, now a preacher of second chances, Marcus carried the heavy burden of his past but refused to let it define him. His voice was calm but firm as he stepped into the circle. "Redemption isn't just about fixing what's broken," he said softly. "It's about choosing what's right, even when it's hard. I've made my peace with my past, but I won't let others suffer what I did." His presence was a testament to hope, that no matter how dark the night, there's always a path toward light. There was also Eleanor, the wise woman of the town, known for her deep understanding of people and their struggles. Her silver hair contrasted with her sharp eyes that seemed to see through lies and fear alike. She approached quietly, placing a gentle hand on Jack's shoulder. "Wisdom is knowing when to fight and when to listen," she said softly. "We need both to bring justice without losing ourselves in the process." Her words grounded the group, reminding them that strength must be tempered with foresight. Finally, Jack called on a young outsider, Liam, a recent arrival from a distant city, whose outsider perspective gave him clarity and hope. His energetic stance and eager eyes spoke of a different kind of courage, the courage to stand for what's right, even when no one's watching. "I may be new here," he said with a grin, "but I believe in what we're doing. We're a family now, and I'll fight for that. No matter where I come from, I stand for justice." His youthful optimism sparked a renewed fire in everyone's hearts. As they assembled, each one a pillar of strength, the night seemed to crackle with an unspoken unity. These allies, each embodying loyalty, courage, redemption, wisdom, and hope, formed an unbreakable circle around Jack. In their eyes, there was no doubt that together, they could face whatever darkness lurked in the shadows. This was more than a fight. It was a testament to the human spirit's resilience. And as they prepared to confront injustice, they carried with them the values that made them stronger than any threat, values that would light their way through the darkness and remind them that they were not alone. Dawn broke slowly over the horizon, casting a pale, cold light across the endless stretch of highway that wound through the barren plains. The sky was a muted gray, hinting at storms that had yet to arrive, mirroring the tension that churned inside Jack's chest. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white as he pressed the old truck forward, each mile a step closer to a truth he couldn't ignore. The landscape around him was vast and unyielding, dusty fields, jagged mountains in the distance, and the whisper of wind that carried memories of a life long past. To Jack, this journey was more than just a ride. It was a pilgrimage into the depths of his soul, a symbolic trek through his own storm of guilt, hope, and unspoken promises. As the truck rumbled on, his mind drifted back to that night. The boy's trembling voice, the echo of broken silence, and the look in the old cowboy's eyes that had shattered the peace of their quiet town. It was a night that had changed everything. The landscape seemed to echo his internal struggle, the open plains stretching endlessly as if to swallow his doubts and fears. Every mile felt like a step away from the innocence he once knew and toward a confrontation that would test his resolve. The road ahead was uncertain, paved with the weight of moral duty and the price of keeping a vow he had made long ago, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, even if it meant risking everything. Memories flickered like fading stars, images of Marie's smile, the promise he'd whispered in her ear that he'd guard her children, the nights he'd sat alone beside her grave, swearing to carry her memory in his heart. Those promises had become his armor and his burden. Now, as the storm of injustice loomed closer, the landscape outside reflected that tumult. Dark clouds gathering, threatening to burst open, just like the storm inside him. Every flash of lightning in his mind was a reminder of the night he'd sworn to stand firm, no matter the cost. The highway twisted through the terrain, an unsteady ribbon linking his past and his future. With each passing mile, Jack felt the weight of his history pressing down. Scars on his hands, the medals hidden beneath his shirt, the letters from Marie that he kept folded close in his pocket. Reminders of everything he'd lost and everything he still fought for. His thoughts wandered to his children, their faces etched into his memory, their innocence stolen by the darkness that haunted their community. That darkness had to be faced. That's what his vow demanded. As the sun climbed higher, breaking through the gray, Jack's inner voice grew louder, urging him forward. He remembered the nights he had sat alone under the stars, contemplating the meaning of justice, redemption, and sacrifice. Those quiet moments had always been a battleground of doubt and conviction. Now they fueled his determination. He understood that this journey wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about confronting his own fears, accepting the cost of justice, and proving that some promises, some moral debts, were worth every ounce of pain. The landscape gradually shifted as he crossed into unfamiliar territory, a stretch of deserted highway flanked by jagged rocks and sparse brush. The emptiness was deafening, mirroring his own solitude. In that silence, he heard his own heartbeat, loud and relentless, as if echoing the urgency of his mission. The horizon ahead was shrouded in darkness, a symbol of the unknown dangers that awaited, but also a promise. An unspoken vow that he would face whatever came to protect the innocent, to honor the memory of Marie, and to uphold the moral compass that guided him through the shadows. Every mile was a toll, an investment of his strength, his hope, and his resolve. The storm was near, but so was the truth. The journey was both literal and symbolic, a passage through storms and serenity, through darkness and dawn. And with each turn of the wheel, Jack carried the weight of his past, the promise of his future, and the unbreakable bond that tied him to his moral duty. The horizon was waiting, and he knew that the price of keeping his vow was paid in blood and sacrifice, in tears and tears shed in silence. But he would go on, because some promises are worth every storm, every mile, and every sacrifice to see them fulfilled. The truck's engine finally coughed to a stop outside the small town's modest courthouse, its worn tires crunching softly on the gravel. Jack sat for a moment, eyes fixed on the distant horizon, feeling the weight of the journey settle heavily into his bones. The storm that had been gathering in his mind now felt like it was swirling outside, ready to burst. As he stepped out of the truck, the air was thick with anticipation, almost electric. The quiet was deafening, broken only by the distant murmur of townsfolk gathering, their shadows stretching long in the early morning light. Every breath he took seemed to draw in the tension that hung in the stillness, an unspoken warning of what was to come. The transition from the open road to this tense battlefield was like crossing a threshold into a different world, a place where words would turn to weapons and silence would speak louder than any gunshot. Jack's boots crunched the gravel as he moved toward the courthouse, but his eyes flicked to the small crowd already forming, their faces a mixture of suspicion, fear, and resolve. They stood in quiet, deliberate formation, men and women shoulder to shoulder, like a living wall protecting their own. The group's presence was powerful, a silent testament to their unity and shared anger. No one needed to speak. Their posture said everything. Arms crossed, fists clenched, eyes fixed ahead. They formed a line that stretched from the courthouse steps into the street, a human barricade that commanded attention, demanding respect. Jack's heart beat faster, knowing that this was more than just a gathering. It was a visual declaration that the town was ready to face whatever truths or threats awaited inside. The early morning light cast stark shadows across their faces, emphasizing the determination etched into every line. He could feel their collective anticipation, a mixture of dread and defiance, as if the very air around them crackled with the energy of an impending storm. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, broken only by the faint whispers of speculation and the occasional clearing of a throat. The crowd's stillness gave them an almost spectral quality, like ghosts of a past that refused to stay buried. Each person seemed to stand rooted in place, forming an unbreakable mosaic of courage and fear intertwined. Jack's gaze swept over them, recognizing Marie's brother with his jaw clenched tight, her father with eyes steeled in anger, the young mother clutching her child close. Each of them united in this moment of impending confrontation. Their collective stance was a visual symphony of resolve. Shoulders squared, heads held high, eyes fixed on the courthouse doors as if willing them to open, revealing the truth. The distant hum of a siren or a car engine might have signaled the start of something inevitable, but now the silence held its own weight, pressing down on everyone like a tangible force. It was a battlefield already in formation, an arena where words had failed and actions would define their fate. The quiet was a prelude to chaos, a calm before the storm, and in that stillness, Jack understood that the true fight had already begun. Not just outside the courthouse, but within each of them. An internal battle of loyalty, justice, and moral courage. As he took a deep breath, the horizon behind the crowd darkened with clouds, mirroring the brewing storm in his mind. The visual power of the gathered group, their unwavering stance, the silent promise etched into their faces, became a living testament to the town's collective spirit. They weren't just witnesses to a potential conflict. They were its defenders, standing firm against the darkness creeping into their lives. The moment was frozen in time, a tableau of tension and resolve that would soon explode into action. Jack felt the pulse of their unity, the silent vow that they would face whatever came with everything they had. The battlefield was already set, and the eyes of every soul in that small town were fixed on the courthouse door, waiting. Ready, because sometimes the most powerful battles begin in silence, and the true strength lies in a collective stand that speaks louder than any words ever could. The room was thick with silence, the kind that presses heavily against the walls and settles deep into the bones. Jack stood at the center, eyes locked on the figure before him. An authority figure, a man trusted by the town, now revealed to be something far darker. The doctor, the judge, or perhaps the preacher. What mattered was the way he wielded his position like a weapon, cloaked in a veneer of morality that hid his true nature. The man's gaze was sharp, calculated, knowing that his words could cut deeper than any physical blow. He leaned forward slightly, a subtle but deliberate display of control, like a predator sizing up his prey. His voice was smooth but edged with an undercurrent of menace, designed to manipulate, to intimidate, to bend the truth without ever raising a hand. "Now, Jack," he said softly, "you know how delicate these matters are. Sometimes the truth isn't always black and white. Sometimes it's complicated, more complicated than a simple boy's accusations." The words were a whisper of persuasion, but behind them lurked a dangerous undercurrent of moral corruption. This man, with his authority, was adept at twisting facts, at sowing doubt, planting seeds of confusion that could grow into chaos if left unchecked. Jack felt the mental duel sharpen with every syllable. It wasn't about fists or guns. It was about the battle of integrity versus manipulation, truth versus concealment. The man's tone was calm, almost reassuring, but Jack sensed the underlying threat, an attempt to make him question his instincts, to second-guess the clarity of his moral compass. "You see, sometimes people in my position have to make tough choices," he continued, his smile thin and knowing. "And I've always tried to do what's best for the town, even if that means bending the rules a little. You understand, don't you?" Jack's mind raced. He knew this man's game, using authority to cover up darkness, to silence those who dared to speak out. He was a master at intimidation, cloaking his manipulation in a veneer of righteousness. But Jack also knew that true justice couldn't be compromised, not even by the most persuasive words or the most authoritative tone. It was about morals, about standing firm without crossing the line into cruelty or corruption. "I understand your position," Jack replied carefully, voice steady but firm. "But I also believe that truth is more important than silence, that justice isn't something you can manipulate or hide behind a badge or a pulpit. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." The man's eyes flickered with a flicker of annoyance, a subtle crack in his carefully crafted facade. He had expected submission, maybe even a little fear. But Jack wasn't backing down. He stood his ground, not with brute force, but with unwavering conviction. His mind was a battlefield of ethics, of moral clarity. He knew the man's tactics, soft words, subtle threats, yet he refused to be swayed, because he understood that power rooted in corruption was the most dangerous kind of villain. It thrived in shadows, in silence, in the manipulation of truth. And Jack was determined to shine a light on it, to expose the darkness, without losing his own soul in the process. "You're a good man, Jack," the man said, voice lowering to a whisper. "But sometimes, goodness isn't enough. Sometimes you have to choose what's easier, what's convenient over what's right. And I'd hate to see you get tangled up in something you can't undo." His words were like a web, designed to entangle, to make Jack doubt himself. But Jack's mind stayed clear. He saw through the veneer, recognizing the moral rot underneath. This was a battle of ideas, of integrity against corruption. It was a contest of strength that didn't require violence, only unwavering principles. "I won't be part of something that's wrong," Jack said quietly, voice resolute. "And I won't let the truth be silenced, no matter who tries to hide it behind their authority." The room's silence stretched longer, the unspoken tension crackling like static in the air. Jack knew that this wasn't just about one man or one secret. It was about the moral fabric of the town itself. And he was prepared to stand firm, to face the storm of manipulation with the power of conviction. Because sometimes the greatest battles are fought in the mind, where integrity, morality, and justice are the true weapons. And Jack was determined to wield them wisely, without crossing the line into cruelty or corruption. The fight wasn't over, not yet, but he had already won a crucial victory. Staying true to himself in the face of deception, standing tall in the storm of moral chaos. The quiet hum of the small town was shattered by the crackle of an old recording device, its worn surface catching the faint sunlight filtering through the courthouse window. Jack held it in trembling hands, staring at the faded tape inside, knowing that what he was about to hear would change everything. Unmask the lies, strip away the villain's mask, and finally bring justice for Marie and her children. This wasn't just a recording. It was the truth long buried beneath layers of deception, manipulation, and silence. As the room went still, the tape hissed softly, then came to life with the voice of the man who had hidden behind authority, the one everyone trusted, yet who had been hiding the darkest of secrets. The voice was shaky at first, but then grew firmer, more deliberate. It was Marie's prescient voice, recorded secretly by a trusted neighbor. Her last desperate attempt to tell the truth before her life was forever altered. "They're hurting my children," she had said, voice trembling but resolute. "He's not the man he pretends to be. The doctor, the judge, the preacher. They're all part of this. They've been using their power to silence us, to keep us quiet. Please, someone listen. The weight of her words hit the room like a freight train. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he listened, every syllable a dagger that pierced through the layers of lies constructed around her suffering. The recording revealed the villain's mask slipping away, his voice, once smooth and commanding, now tinged with guilt and fear. Marie's voice detailed how he had exploited his authority, how he had manipulated her family's desperation, turning their pain into a weapon to silence them. "He threatened my children," she whispered, "saying if we spoke out, they'd be taken away, forever. I tried to fight, but I was too afraid. I hid the truth, but I can't anymore. Please help us." The truth exploded in the room like a long overdue firework. The moral fabric of the town, woven with trust and admiration, was torn wide open. The man's carefully maintained facade crumbled instantaneously. His voice in the recording was raw, exposed, unmasked as the manipulative predator he truly was. The revelation was a floodgate opening, vindicating Marie and her children after years of suffering in silence. Jack's eyes welled with tears, not just for her pain but for the profound justice that this moment promised. This was the moral release, the catharsis of finally confronting evil cloaked in authority. The town's collective conscience awakened, faces turning pale as they processed what they just heard. The villain's mask had been his armor, but the truth had shattered it into pieces. The confession's emotional power overwhelmed the room, an explosion of moral clarity that illuminated the darkest corners of their shared history. Silence enveloped them, heavy and profound, as if the very air was mourning the years lost to concealment. Then, one by one, the townsfolk began to speak, their voices trembling with revelation and relief. The mother's courage, captured in her words, ignited a spark of hope, a moral victory that could no longer be denied. Jack placed a steadying hand on the recording device, feeling the weight of justice settling into his bones. This was more than just proof. It was a moral turning point. The revelation had changed everything, stripping away the villain's veneer and exposing the deep-rooted corruption that had festered beneath their community's surface. Now, with the truth finally out in the open, the town could begin to heal, to confront its past, and to build a future rooted in honesty and justice. Jack's heart swelled with a quiet, fierce pride. The moral battle had been fought not with fists or guns, but with truth, a testament to the power of courage, integrity, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. And as the room settled into a reflective silence, he knew that this was the moment everything changed. The truth had been unveiled, and the story of that boy, his mother, and the whole town would never be the same again. The sun was setting over the dusty plains as the small town gathered in the center square, a tense hush hanging in the air. The old cowboy, Jack, stood at the forefront, holding a worn leather-bound book, the evidence of truth that had finally surfaced. Silence stretched long and heavy, broken only by the faint rustling of the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. Everyone knew what this moment signified. Justice, but not the kind born of revenge. Justice rooted in truth, dignity, and unwavering integrity. It all began with that boy's desperate knock on the barn door, his trembling voice trembling as he declared, "They hurt my mama." That simple, heartbreaking plea had shaken the town to its core. But it was what came after that truly revealed the depth of darkness hiding beneath their community's surface. The revelation that the respected man, the one they all looked up to, had been hiding a terrible secret, one that had caused unbearable suffering to a mother and her children. As the townspeople gathered, Jack stepped forward, his face lined with both weariness and resolve. He knew the weight of what was to come. The truth had been buried for too long, hidden behind masks of respectability, power, and fear. But now it could no longer be contained. The evidence was laid bare. A confession, a recorded truth that exposed the villain's manipulations and cruelty. The man's fall was inevitable, but Jack understood that justice was about more than punishment. It was about restoring moral order. The crowd listened as Jack read aloud from the evidence. Her words, Marie's words, recorded in secret, revealing the depths of the villain's depravity. His manipulation, his threats, his abuse, all laid bare with unwavering clarity. The man's false veneer crumbled under the weight of the truth, his face pale, eyes darting as he realized his carefully constructed facade was no longer intact. The community saw him for what he truly was, a predator hiding behind the guise of respectability, now exposed in front of everyone. But Jack's tone remained respectful, even compassionate. His voice carried the moral authority of someone who understood that justice was rooted in dignity, not revenge. What he did was wrong, Jack said softly, but we are better than the darkness he tried to hide us in. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about truth and integrity. It's about making sure the truth comes out, so we can heal and move forward. Emotion ran high. Some felt anger, others relief, and many tears welled in the eyes of those who had suffered in silence for too long. But amidst the storm of feelings, Jack kept his voice steady and human. We've seen what evil looks like, he continued, and we've seen the courage it takes to stand up against it. Marie was brave to speak out, and her children are brave for surviving. Now, it's our turn to be brave, to choose truth over silence, morality over fear. The man was publicly deposed, his reputation shattered, his power evaporating like mist in the morning sun. Yet, no cheers or jeers broke the solemn respect that filled the square. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement, a collective moral victory. The community had faced the darkness, and they had chosen the light of truth and integrity. Jack stepped back, allowing the crowd to process what had happened. He looked around at the faces, some aged, some young, all bearing the weight of this moral reckoning. Justice arrived, he said softly, not through revenge, but through honesty, not through violence, but through our willingness to face the truth with dignity. That's the kind of justice that lasts. The night descended gently, and as the crowd dispersed, many took a moment to honor Marie and her children, whose courage had ignited this moral awakening. Jack watched them go, knowing that while the villain had fallen, the real victory was in how the town chose to heal. Justice was not just about punishing the guilty. It was about restoring moral order, about ensuring that such darkness could never take root again. And so, in the quiet of that evening, the town's moral fabric was reinforced, a testament to the enduring power of truth and integrity. Jack's promise had been kept, not through revenge, but through unwavering commitment to what was right. The villain's mask had fallen, and with it, the false veneer of respectability. The town was forever changed, but it was changed in a way that honored dignity, human strength, and the moral clarity that only truth could bring. As the last echoes of the confrontation faded into the evening air, Jack turned away from the gathered crowd, his shoulders heavy but his heart lighter than it had been in years. The town was silent now, each face touched by the moral clarity that had finally been revealed. The villain's mask had fallen, exposing the darkness that had lurked beneath years of silence and complicity. Jack knew that justice had been served, not through revenge or anger, but through truth and unwavering integrity. With quiet dignity, he mounted his horse, the soft clip of hooves on the dirt the only sound breaking the stillness. He didn't look back. His task was complete, and his promise fulfilled. The town's wounds would take time to heal, but a new chapter had begun. As he rode out of the square, the fading sunlight cast long shadows across the open plains, illuminating a path that stretched toward the horizon. Behind him, the small town slowly settled into a peaceful hush, the weight of past secrets lifting like fog in the morning sun. The road ahead was open and endless, a symbol of renewal and hope. Meanwhile, inside the humble farmstead, Marie and her children sat on the porch, wrapped in a quiet, collective sense of relief. The shadows of fear and pain still lingered, but in their eyes shone a fragile light, resilience born from suffering, strength forged in truth. The little boy, clutching his mother's hand, looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle in the dusky sky, feeling the promise of a new beginning. This was the moment where pain transformed into hope, a silent testament to the power of courage and honesty. The brotherhood of the town, once divided by secrets, now stood united in understanding and moral resolve. They had faced the darkness together, and in doing so, they had begun to mend the broken fabric of their community. The stars above shimmered like distant beacons, guiding their way forward through the night. As Jack's silhouette disappeared over the horizon, a gentle wind stirred the grass, whispering promises of renewal and peace. The earth beneath their feet, firm and steady, reminded them of resilience, of roots that run deep even in the harshest storms. The open road stretched endlessly, beckoning with the promise of new journeys, new stories waiting to be written. The night sky darkened, and the first stars emerged, small points of hope in the vast, infinite universe. It was a reminder that even after pain, life continues, that healing is a process, and that light always finds a way through darkness. Jack rode on, his figure slowly blending with the horizon, leaving behind the echoes of truth and the promise of a better tomorrow. The town would carry the scars of its past, but also the strength of its newfound honesty. And as the stars shone brighter above, it was clear, hope was not lost. It was simply waiting, quietly, in the vast, open road that beckoned them forward into the night. The journey was just beginning, and with it, the promise of renewal soft, steady, and eternal.